Knight to c5. This is the game between two of Ukraine's top players, Anna Ushenina with the white pieces and Mariya Muzychuk with black. White is currently a pawn up, so definitely in the driver's seat. But is that going to be sufficient? Because what Mariya has just done is put pressure on the a4 pawn. She might want to bring her rook to c4 and then snap off this pawn. Once that happens, black's rook behind the pawn will mean so much. So white has to figure out a way to put pressure on black before that pawn falls. What should Anna Ushenina do? The time is currently 45 seconds for Anna, 1 minute 14 seconds for Mariya Muzychuk. She goes knight to d4. She attacks the rook, but now this allows rook c4 and Mariya plays it. Knight is attacked, also the a4 pawn. What was her idea here? She goes knight f5. She puts pressure on the g7 pawn. The g7 pawn cannot be defended, so she takes on a4. She takes the pawn on a4 and Anna says, I'm not going to trade the rooks. I'm going rook c1, knight e6, defending the g7 pawn and also stopping rook c7. So very multi-purpose move there. Rook c6, attacking the knight. If the knight moves, the g7 pawn falls. So a lot of action happening here. But knight d4 might be a good idea. No, she goes rook e4, which is also a good move. Ushenina is on 20 seconds. She goes rook e7, pins the knight. Now, it's trouble time for black, is it? Or not? Because knight d4 seems like the only move for Mariya. And she can also go rook e1, check. She goes knight d4. She finds it. Brilliant move. Because if you take on d4, your e7 is hanging. If you take the rook, then I take one on c6. Wow. Rook c4, what a big blunder by white, because now knight e2 check or knight f3 and picking up the rook. That's a simple tactic. It's a big mistake there. Can Mariya Muzychuk find it? She has a lot of time on the clock. She moves the knight. Oh, she blunders back. She takes here and rook takes e4, knight d6. Okay, she's managed to win back material, but it's an equal rook endgame now. Or is it? Because the a-pawn is pushing forward. Anna Ushenina blocks it. At best, it seems like black is the one pushing here. King d3, king e5, king c4. White king is running towards the a-pawn. But is it possible to win that pawn? Because if you do that, the black king might round up the pawns on the king side. It requires accurate calculation, but both players have only seconds on the clock. So king b4 played. And now king e4. Should Anna Ushenina take the pawn or not? She has 12 seconds to decide. She takes it. She just hopes that it will work out in her favor. And Mariya takes king d3 played. Now, what should white do? There's no real time left to think. She has 8 seconds on the clock. She goes king b3. King e2 played in. Now the f2 pawn is hanging. She goes g4. That's not the best move. We're going to analyze this game in detail later. But for now, g4 has been played. Mariya has 29 seconds to figure out what the best move here is. What does she do? She takes on g4, edge g4, king f2, king c3, king f3, king d3, pawn takes. Is this a draw? Not really. King g3 and king h2. The g pawn rushes through. Mariya Muzychuk has won the game. What a pawn endgame that was. Let's have a look at the analysis of this endgame to figure out, was there any better defense for white? Let's join the game at this point onwards. It seems like white is in a big mess. That's because the black king has just moved to d3 and the idea is to come here and round up these 3 pawns with your 2 passers. 2 pawns here. The white king is too far away. So here the battle has to be fought by these pawns alone. And that's the reason why there are 2 moves which draw here. And they are, the first move is h4. This is a very powerful move because after gh4, king b3, the main issue is that you cannot come king e2 because f4 and I suddenly start pushing my pawn. So that makes a lot of sense. What happens to g4 now? Well, then you make a very nice move which is f4. And the point is that now after takes, you will lose the f pawn, but while the black king tries to round up the h pawn, all that white king has to do is to come to f1. If he manages that, he is in time to draw the game with the h pawn. So here we go, king b3, king f3, king c3, king g4, king d3, king h4, king e2, king g3, king f1, and it's a draw. So that's the reason why h4 works here. What happens if you go king b4? This move also draws. And the very important point to note here is that after h4 by black, the main point here is that you have to play king c5, king e2. Now notice that after king b4, if instead black had gone king e2 first, then a very strong move is h4. To g4, we still go ahead with the same idea of f4, takes king here, and our king will still reach back to e1. And if he doesn't play g4 and if he plays takes here, then we have f4 working in our favor once again, and this will be a draw in this manner. Takes, f6, h3, h3, f2, h2, f8, and a draw. So that's the reason why king b4, h4 is the best try for a win. King c5, king e2, and now comes a very important move. What is it? f4. The point is that after takes, you go king d4, king f2, king e4, and now king g3. And here once again white has to find the only move to hold the draw, and that is king e5. Exactly, this is a very important move. So if you play king f5, the problem is that after f3 takes, king h3, your own king is blocking the path of the pawn. So let's say if I play f4, king g3, king e5, h3, f5, h2, f6, queen, then you are not in time to queen the pawn and black wins. But if you play king e5, then now after f3 takes here, white is just in time to also queen his pawn. That was a very beautiful line. Now, if king b4 and h4 both draw, what is the problem with king b3? Well, turns out that after the move h4, white has no way to make this plan work where she was coming from the top with the king. So here this is a losing position. There's no move if you play king b4. Now king e2 is way quicker, and after f4 takes, the king is just too far away. Black king is just going to win these pawns. So that was one of the main issues with king b3. But here black made a mistake with king e2, and this gave white the final opportunity to save the game. What could Anna Ushenina have done here? She could have pushed her pawn to h4, and this was the only drawing move here, because after g4, let's say gh4, we already know that f4 is coming in, and after g4 we have seen that f3 does the job in the same way that we saw in the previous lines. But king e2 was met with g4. This was a mistake, and now Mariya did not give her opponent any chances, because after h takes g4, king f2, black is winning the game as was seen in the actual game. Mariya went on to win this. So a very important moment here. White had to find either king b4 or h4, but she wasn't able to do that, and a very instructive pawn endgame. Hope you liked it and you learned something from it.